Today we're still discussing the unit on factoring, but we are going to talk about particular cases. In specific, we're going to talk about a case where the coefficient in front of the x squared is not equal to the number 1. So your first term would have something like 17 in front of it, or negative 30, 35, 40, whatever the number is. It's just not an understood one. So what would you do? First, we need to talk about a little old lady whose nickname was Maam Fitrac. The kids in her town nicknamed her this because she demanded respect from everyone and had a particular way that she thought that she was getting it. So the nickname came from how the kids would have to answer to her. For example, they would have to answer like this, no matter what. They would have to say, yes, ma'am. They would have to say, no, ma'am. They would have to say, thank you, ma'am. So it was always something like this. So she would feel that she was getting the utmost respect. Now, thanks to those kids, we can use her nickname to solve this type of factoring problem that we're looking at today. So get your pencil and paper ready to write down the following steps. Here we go. First one. M stands for move. A stands for around. A stands for and. And the last M stands for multiply. So obviously this is spelling out ma'am, and our steps are to move around and multiply. F stands for factor. I stands for it. T stands for then. R stands for return. A stands for and. C stands for clear. So there's Fitrac. Factor it, then return and clear. So all together for Maam Fitrac we have move around and multiply, factor it, then return and clear. Let's look at some problems in dealing with these steps and let's solve them out. So again, we're dealing with factoring trinomials when A is not equal to 1, and what I'm referring to as the A is if you're looking at something or a trinomial in standard form, we have ax squared plus bx equals c. So when this first letter or first number is not equal to 1. And we have an example here that we're going to look at. But do not forget the first rule of factoring, which has already been discussed, is the GCF, which stands for to find your greatest common factor. It's almost like reducing the problem down. So let's look at this one. We have 2x squared plus x minus 6. We are in standard form, and notice the number in the coefficient in front of the x squared. It is not an understood one. It's actually the number 2. This falls into the category of using Maam Fitrac. Now, some teachers don't refer to it as Maam Fitrac. This is something that I made up a long time ago. Some people may call it the step method. Some people may call it bottoms up. It's all the same procedure though. So let's look. What is causing a problem that makes it difficult for us to factor, or makes you a little uncomfortable in doing so? It's the fact that there is a number in front of that x squared. So what are we going to do? First and foremost, let's see if there is a greatest common factor to take out. Is there something in common between 2x squared, x, and a negative 6? No, I would agree with you. There is no common ground whatsoever, no common factor that can be taken out. So let's get right to the steps. Remember that MAM stands for move around and multiply. So what are we going to move around? We're going to move around this number that's in front of the x squared. We're going to move it around and multiply it to the very last number, which is a negative 6. So 2 times negative 6 is negative 12. Now everything else is going to stay the same. So now we have x squared plus x minus 12. And everybody should feel comfortable right here in working this particular problem. So we've done move around and multiply. Next, what does FI stand for? You're right. factor it. So let's factor this. Let's factor this trinomial. How can we break down x squared? An x and an x. One in this parenthesis, one in the other. All right, and let's go with this. We've got to find two numbers that will multiply together to get this number here, which is a negative 12. But at the same time, those factors have to add together to get a positive 1. So multiply to get a negative number and add to get a positive. Well, the only way to multiply and get a negative number is for our signs to be different, a positive and a negative. Now, it doesn't matter which place you put them in. One needs to be positive, one needs to be negative. So let's think about this. Two numbers that would multiply together to get negative 12, but add together to get a positive 1. All right, if you're thinking 4 and 3, you are on the right track. It is 4 and 3. Now, it's a matter of which number do you put with which sign. Now, notice if you add them together, it's got to be a positive 1. So when adding terms or adding factors of different signs, remember, you add them together and take the sign of the larger. So the largest number needs to go with the plus sign, since that's the sign in the middle. So I have a 4 and a 3. So let's do a mental check. Positive 4 times negative 3 gives me negative 12. I'm good to go. Positive 4 plus negative 3 gives me a positive 1. Am I right? So we've done move around and multiply, factor it, okay, and the TR stands for then return. What are we going to return? We're going to return the number in which we moved in the very beginning that was causing us problems from the get-go. We're going to return that underneath both of our factors. So return that 2 to both of them. Now, so we've done then return. Now our last two letters are A and C, which stands for and clear. So we cannot have any fractions at all. So let's put that down here. No fractions left. No decimals. No fractions or decimals when working this. That would be the easy thing to do. But unfortunately, that's not the correct thing to do. So let's look at this. We've got to clear this out. We've got a 4 divided by 2. We know what 4 divided by 2 is. That clears out just fine to a whole number, which we're all right. X plus 2. Over here, 3 divided by 2. We can't reduce that fraction. And we can't put it as a decimal. And we surely can't leave it as a fraction. So what do? We take our bottom number and bump it in front of the x. So now we have 2x minus 3. This is our factored form of 2x squared plus x minus 6. Now, a good thing about it, on all these factoring problems, once you get a particular answer, you can check this by working the full method. Multiply the first terms together and the outside terms together, the inside, and the last. And combining like terms, you should get this answer right here, what you originally started with, which was the 2x squared plus x minus 6. All right, let's take it a step further. Let's go with this one right here. 9x cubed minus 39x squared plus 36x. All right, so 9x cubed minus 39x squared plus 36x. Okay, we're asked to factor this. First rule of factoring is a greatest common factor, finding a GCF. Look at this trinomial a second and see if you can figure out what is, or if there is any, greatest common factor. All right, this is what I see. I see that the number 3 will go into 9, 39, and 36. Also, not only is there just a number that is a greatest common factor, each term also has an x that I can pull out from each one. So my greatest common factor is 3x. Now, if I take 3x out of every single term, which is like dividing it, what would I have left? Well, let's see. 9x cubed divided by 3x. 9 divided by 3 is 3. And if I take an x out of the x cubed, I'm left with x squared. Let's go to the next one. Negative 39 divided by 3 is a negative 13. If I take an x out of this x squared, I'll just have 1 left over. And last, Positive 36 divided by 3 is a positive 12. If I take an x away from this, there will be none there. So all I've done so far is take out my greatest common factor, which was 3x. And I'm left inside with 3x squared minus 13x plus 12. This is not factored all the way down. I know of a particular method to factor this down to lowest terms. And since there is a number other than 1 in front of this x squared, I'm going to get to use Maam Fitrac. Now I'm writing down her name to keep me organized and keep me through all these steps, which I'm going to have to go through. So here we go. What does Maam stand for? Move around and multiply. What am I going to move around? I'm going to move around the coefficient in front of the x squared. Move it around to the very tail end and multiply it, and I get positive 36. Now all this stays the same. And you know what's going with me the entire time? This greatest common factor. Keep it coming. All right, now let's go. We did move around and multiply. Fi stands for factor it. Let's find two numbers multiplied together that'll give us 36, but added together that will give us a negative 13. Got 'em. How about 9 and 4? 9 and 4, because 9 times 4 is 36, and 9 plus 4 is 13, but look at this sign. Got to multiply to get a positive and add to get negatives. Both of these are going to be negative. To break down x squared, I've got an x and x. Guess what's coming along? This 3x. Keep it coming. All right, so I moved around and multiplied, factored it, then return. What do I return? I return the number in which we moved to begin with, which was a 3. So let's put a 3 here, and let's put a 3 here. All right, move around and multiply, factor it, then return, and clear. No fractions, no decimals, reduce if possible. So let's check this one out. 9 divided by 3, this fraction will reduce to a even number, or a whole number I should say. And 4 divided by 3, or 4 over 3, that does not reduce to a whole number. And we can't have a fraction, so let's do the bump and bump it right in front of that variable. So we got 3x minus 4. What keeps coming along? Our GCF. This is our factored form. Check me this time. Take this answer right here and use the distributive property, the full method, multiply all this back out, and tell me whether you get this after you've combined like terms. Bring that to class with you. Let's talk about it. Hope everything went well. Remember Maam Fitrac.